Chapter 30. The next day was Zigzag's birthday, or so he said. Zigzag lay in his cot as everyone headed outside. "I go to sleep in because it's my birthday." Then, a little while later, he cut into the breakfast line just in front of Squid. Squid told him to go to the end of the line. "Hey, it's my birthday," Zigzag said, saying where he was. "It's not your birthday," said Magnet, who was standing behind Squid. "It is too," said Zigzag. "July 8th. Stanley was behind Magnet. He didn't know what day of the week it was, let alone the date. It could have been July 8th, but how would Zigzag know? He tried to figure out how long he'd been at Camp Green Lake, if indeed it was July 8th. "I came here on May 24th, he said aloud, "so that means I've been here 46 days, said Zero. Stanley was still trying to remember how many days there were there in May and June. He looked at Zero. He learned not to doubt him when it came to math. 46 days, it felt more like 1,000. He didn't dig a hole that first day, and he hadn't dug one yet today. That means he dug 44 holes, if it really was July 8th. "Can I have an extra carton of juice?" Zigzag asked Mr. Sir. "It's my birthday." To everyone's surprise, Mr. Sir gave it to him. Stanley stuck his shovel into the dirt. Hole number 45. "The 45th hole is the hardest," he said to himself, but that really wasn't true, and he knew it. He was a lot stronger than when he first arrived. His body had adjusted somewhat to the heat and the harsh conditions. Mr. Sir was no longer depriving him of water. After having to get by on less water for a week or so, Stanley now felt like he had all the water he could want. Of course it helped that Zero dug some of his hole for him each day, but that wasn't as great as everyone thought it was. He always felt awkward while Zero was digging his hole, unsure of what to do with himself. Usually he stood around a while before sitting off by himself on the hard ground with the sun beating down on him. It was better than digging, but not a lot better. When the sun came up a couple of hours later, Stanley looked for the thumb of God. The mountains were little more than dark shadows on the horizon. He thought he could make out a spot where the top of one mountain seemed to jut upward, but it didn't seem very impressive. A short time later, the mountains were no longer visible, hidden behind the glare of the sun reflecting off the dirty air. It was possible, he realized, that he was somewhere near Cape Barlow had robbed his great-grandfather. If that really was her lipstick to be found, then she must have lived somewhere around here. Zero took his turn before the lunch break. Stanley climbed out of his hole and Zero climbed down into it. "Hey, caveman," said Zigzag, "you should get a whip. Then if your slave doesn't dig fast enough, you can crack it across his back." "He's not my slave," said Stanley. "We have a deal, that's all." "A good deal for you," said Zigzag. "It was Zero's idea, not mine." "Don't you know, Zig?" said X-Ray, coming over. "Caveman's doing Zero a big favor. Zero likes to dig holes. He sure is a nice guy to let Zero dig his hole for him," said Squid. "Well, what about me?" asked Armpit. "I like to dig holes too. Can I dig for you, Caveman, after Zero's finished?" The other boys laughed. "No, I want to," said Zigzag. "It's my birthday." Stanley tried his best to ignore him. Zigzag kept at it. "Come on, Caveman, be a pal. Let me dig your hole." Stanley smiled, as if it were all a big joke. When Mr. Pendanski arrived with water and lunch, Zigzag offered Stanley his place in line. "Since you're so much better than me." Stanley remained where he was. "I didn't say I was You're insulting him, Zig," said X-Ray. "Why should Caveman take your place when he deserves to be at the very front? He's better than all of us, aren't you, Caveman?" "No," said Stanley. "Sure you are," said X-Ray. "Now come to the front of the line where you belong." "That's okay," said Stanley. "No, it's not okay," said X-Ray. "Get up here." Stanley hesitated and moved to the front of the line. "Well, this is a first," said Mr. Pendanski, coming around the side of the truck. He filled Stanley's canteen and handed him a sack lunch. Stanley was glad to get away. He sat down between his hole and Zero's. He was glad that he'd be digging his own hole for the rest of the day. Maybe the other boys would leave him alone. Maybe he shouldn't let Zero dig his hole for him anymore, but he needed to save his energy to be a good teacher. He bit into the sandwich, which contained some kind of meat and cheese mixture that came in a can. Just about everything in Green Lake came in a can. The supply truck came once a month. He glanced up to see Zigzag and Squid walking toward him. "I'll give you my cookie if you let me dig your hole," said Zigzag. Squid laughed. "Here, take my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it out for him. "No thanks," said Stanley. "Come on, take my cookie," said Zigzag, sticking it in his face. "Leave me alone," said Stanley. "Please eat my cookie," said Zigzag, holding it under Stanley's nose. Squid laughed. Stanley pushed it away. Zigzag pushed him back. "Don't push me! I didn't..." Stanley got to his feet, looked around. Mr. Pendanski was filling Zero's canteen. Zigzag pushed him again. I said, don't push me! Stanley took a step backward, carefully avoiding Zero's hole. Zigzag kept after him. He shoved Stanley and said, quit pushing! Pushing! Lay off, said Armpit as he and Magnet and X-Ray joined them. Why should he? Snapped X-Ray. Caveman's bigger. He can take care of himself. I don't want any trouble, Stanley said. Zigzag pushed him hard. Eat my cookies, said. Stanley was glad to see Mr. Pendanski coming toward them along with Zero. Hi, Munson, Armpit. We were just fooling around. I saw what was going on, Mr. Pendanski said. He turned to Stanley. Go ahead, Stanley said. Hit him back. You're bigger. Stanley stared at Mr. Pendanski in astonishment. Teach the bully a lesson, said Mr. Pendanski. Zigzag hit Stanley on with his open hand. Teach me a lesson, he challenged. Stanley made a feeble attempt to punch Zigzag, then he felt a flurry of fists against his head and neck. Zigzag had hold of his collar with one hand and was hanging with the other. The collar ripped and Stanley fell backward onto the dirt. That's enough! Mr. Pendanski said. It wasn't enough for Zigzag. He jumped on top of Stanley. Stop! Shouted Mr. Pendanski. The side of Stanley's face was pressed against the dirt. He tried to protect himself, but Zigzag's fist slammed off his arms and pounded his face into the ground. All he could do was wait for it to be over. Then suddenly, Zigzag was off of him. Stanley managed to look up and he saw that Zero had his arm around Zigzag's long neck. Zigzag made a gasping sound as he tried desperately to pry Zero's arm off of him. You're gonna kill him, shouted Mr. Zero stopped squeezing. Armpit charged into them, freezing Zigzag from Zero's chokehold. The three boys fell into the ground in different directions. Mr. Pendanski fired his pistol into the air. The other counselors came running from the office to tents or out in the lake. They had their guns drawn, but holstered them when they saw the trouble was over. The one walked over from her cabin. There was a riot, Mr. Pendanski told her. Zero almost strangled Ricky. The one looked at Zigzag, who was still stretching and massaging his neck. Then she turned her attention to Stanley, who was obviously in the worst condition. What happened to him? Nothing. It was a riot. Zigzag was beating up Caveman, said Armpit. Then Zero started choking Zigzag and I had to pull Zero off of Zigzag. He was all over before Mom fired his gun. I just got a little hot, that's all, said X-Ray. You know how it is. In the sun all day, people get hot, right? But everything's cool now. I see, the one said. She turned to Zigzag. What's the matter? Didn't you get a puppy for your birthday? Zig's just a little hot, said X-Ray. I'm the sun all day. You know how it is. The blood starts to boil. Is that what happened, Zigzag? Asked the warden. Yeah, said Zigzag, like X-Ray said, working so hard in the hot sun, while K-Man just sits around doing nothing. My blood boiled. Excuse me? Said the warden. K-Man digs his holes, just like everyone else. He said the one. K-Man digs his holes just like everyone else. Zigzag shrugged. Sometimes, excuse me, Zero's been digging part of... Said Squid. The one looked from Squid to Stanley and Zero. I'm teaching you to read and write, said Stanley. It's sort of a trade. The whole cell gets eggs, so what does it matter who digs it? Excuse me, said the warden. Isn't it more important for him to learn to read? Stanley asked. Doesn't that build character more than digging holes? That's his character, said the warden. What about your character? Stanley raised and lowered one shoulder. The warden turned to Zero. Well, Zero, what have you learned so far? Zero said nothing. Have you noticed he came in home for nothing? The warden asked him. He likes to dig holes, said Mr. Pendanski. Tell me what you learned yesterday, said the warden. Surely you can remember that. Zero said nothing. Mr. Pendanski laughed. He picked up a shovel and said, you might as well try to teach the shovel to read. It's got more brains than Zero. The at sounds at Zero. The at, repeated the warden. Well then, tell me what the C-A-T spell. Zero glanced around uneasily. Zero knew he knew the answer. Zero just doesn't like answering questions. Cat, said Zero. Pendanski clapped his hands. Bravo, bravo, the boy's a genius. F-A-T, said the warden. Zero thought a moment. Stanley hadn't taught him the F sound yet. Zero whispered. Fat. How about H-A-T?
Not all of the landscaping had been completed, and this produced the first piece of it.
Stanley hadn't taught him the H sound either. Zero concentrated and said chat. All the counselors laughed. He's a genius, alright, said Mr. Pendanski. He's so stupid he doesn't even know he's stupid. Stanley didn't know why Mr. Pendanski seemed to have it in for Zero. If Mr. Pendanski only thought about it, he realized it was very logical for Zero to think that the letter H made the sound. Okay, from now on I don't want anyone digging anyone else's hole, and the one said, and no more reading lessons. I'm I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Good, said the one. She turned to Stanley. You know why you're digging holes? Because it's good for you. It teaches you a lesson. If Zero digs a hole for you, then you're not learning a lesson, are you? I guess not. Stanley mumbled, although he knew they weren't digging just to learn a lesson. She was looking for something that belonged to Kissing Kate Barlow. Why can't I dig my own hole but still teach Zero to read? He asked. What's wrong with that? I'll tell you what's wrong with that. The one said. It leads to trouble. Zero was told Zigzag. It causes him distress, said Mr. Banansky. I know you mean well, Stanley, but face it. Zero's too stupid to learn to read. That's what makes his blood boil, not the hot sun. I'm not digging another hole, said Zero. Mr. Banansky handed him the shovel. Here, take it, Zero. It's all you'll ever be good for. Zero took the shovel, then he swung it like a baseball bat. The metal blade smashed across Mr. Panansky's face. His knees crumpled beneath him. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. The counselors all drew their guns. Zero held the shovel in front of him and began to hit away the bullets. I hate digging holes, he said. Then he slowly backed away. Don't shoot him, said the warden. He can't go anywhere. The last thing we need is an investigation. Zero kept backing up, out past the cluster of holes the boys had been digging, them farther and farther out into the lake. He's going to have to come back for water, the lion said. Silent on Zero's canteen lying on the ground near his hole. A couple of counselors helped Mr. Pendansky to his feet and onto the truck. Sam looked out towards Zero, but he disappeared into the haze. The warden ordered the counselors to take turns guarding the shower room and the rec room all day and all night. They were not let Zero drink any water. When he returned, he was to be brought directly to her. She examined her fingernails and said, It's almost time for me to paint my nails again. Before she left, she told the remaining 6 members of Group D that she still expected 7 holes.